is the third book on Scotland that Gerry and I have worked on together, and that's been a real pleasure. And we, of course, have contributed together an introduction and also an afterword, not in order to have the first and last word, but in order perhaps to point out where the conversation about Scotland after the virus is coming from and where it's going. But Gerry, I mean, what we tried to do with this book was to recognise that the impact of the personal should have an impact on our politics, and likewise politics will have an impact on our personal experiences as well as we try to live in and beyond the pandemic. So I wondered if you could say a little bit about what that means for you and for the contributions that you've made to this.
Thank you for that, Simon, and thank you for all those great contributions so far. That gave me a lot to think about. It was funny when we first thought of this book, because first of all, when we thought about it, it became initially a challenge to me, because we didn't then think of it and plan it in a conventional way. We didn't sit down with a template and think X, Y, Z. It developed a bit while we were thinking about these different genres and different styles, which was there from the outset. And then actually what happened was it became something that it's also, when you work together longer term and the challenge of COVID and so on, and all these brilliant contributions, it I think became something much more enjoyable for us and more inspiring, and hopefully for other people too. My original hope about the book was a hope, and to be an inspiration, a little bit of an invitation to think beyond that afterward, and also a little bit of a provocation. And I think the words that were most important were hope, mixed with also trying to, I think it was Hannah used the word witness. It was a sense of capturing something of this moment, this watershed moment, and then thinking what happens and changes and what happens after that, and exploring the human imagination in different ways through that. And one of the big things for me, which is, I sometimes explain the book to people by saying it's not a political book, and they said, well, of course it's a political book, but it's a book which the politics are different. It was trying to combine the big things in life with the very human things, and recognising the importance that the small things really matter. So yes, there's big existential questions in this book about the economy and the planet and capitalism. But I think Simon's already touched on this. That's not the way most people live their lives. Most people don't go around their lives thinking about abstracts like, my God, what are we going to do about the 1%? Or you know, they think about the power of the local and the immediate and the relationships they have, and the power of relationships, good and bad, because when they're bad, they often really determine people's lives. And when they're good, they aid them. And I think I just want to say two quick other things about context. One is that I think through all my politics, practically for all my adult life, I've been struggling to find a language that is about the challenges we face, given all sorts of things. And I think in COVID, and with the changing nature of Britain, there is an issue of brutality in some language, along with all the wonderful things that have happened, and a brutal language used by some on the right, which is, I'm just going to use one example here because it's very prevalent, is the language of our fellow Scots, Andrew Neil and Fraser Nelson, who have been taking to the airwaves in the last few weeks to talk about Scotland and public health and life expectancy, comparing Scotland to, and the East End of Glasgow particularly, to sub-Saharan Africa. And I've been using figures that are 20 years out of date on that, with their usual, insider class arrogance, etc., and getting lots of time for that. And there's kind of a desperation there, and a kind of inhumanity and arrogance, etc. But what it's about is trying to diminish and depower us. And it's just not really very helpful, but it's symptomatic of something more. And so my final observation is, which I think really relates to some of this stuff and has happened during the COVID pandemic, is the Netflix series, The Crown. Now, for people that don't want to watch something about the royals, this is an insider account. Part of it's fiction and over-dramatised, but an insider account of the British establishment. And what I think it tells us is, because the parts of the ruling class hate this, is it's telling us some truths that have never been told. It also tells us how the royal family and that institution infantilizes us. And it makes us, I think, strangers in our own home. And I think it raised the question, which is much, much bigger than independence and much, much bigger than whether to remain in the United Kingdom, maybe even bigger than Brexit, you know. And it says, when will this be our house? And when will we make our own rules? Because we don't do that in Britain. And I think that's one of the things about why a whole pile of people, like Richard Dimbleby and Penny Junor and so on, they hate the Crown, because we're having, you know, some truths finally told. And those are big questions that, you know, hopefully we can begin to ask and answer after the virus.